welcome to the NACCTEP Now podcast, dedicated to empowering teacher educators and celebrating the vital role of community colleges in shaping the future of teaching. I'm your host, Julie Ferin, the Executive Director of the National Association of Community College Teacher Education Programs. I'm here to bring you insightful discussions, innovative ideas, and inspiring stories from the world of community college teacher preparation. Whether you're an educator or an administrator or simply passionate about the impact of community colleges, NACCTEP Now is your go-to resource for all things teacher education. Today, I'm excited to welcome Ken Spero, President and co-founder of SchoolSims. Ken has spent more than 30 years exploring a simple but powerful idea: experience is the best teacher. Over time, that belief has grown into work that helps school leaders practice the kinds of decisions that are hard, human, and deeply relational. In recent years, Ken has focused on what he calls the silent crisis of leadership in K-12. Not because leaders don't care, but because too often they're asked to learn through trial and error alone. His work with simulations creates space to learn, reflect, and grow before the stakes are real. Ken brings both heart and systems thinking into his work. I'm excited to talk to him today about leadership, learning, and how relationships sit at the center of it all. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
I've been looking forward to digging in on how simulations can support leaders before the stakes are real. And I think SchoolSims really has a great product that does just that. So
Thank you.
let
And
me
teachers as well. So, because I
yes,
want to keep them out of
you're
it, but
well, yeah,
it's
all teachers are leaders, that's
right.
for sure. Leaders, role models, yes, and that is, we know that those students in the classroom are looking at that teacher as the leader. So we want to make sure that, you know, we capture the times that a teacher is feeling confident. And I think that SchoolSims really can help those future teachers, current teachers, and people who have been our veteran teachers who have been in the field a long time. We never stop growing professionally. And that's why I think that this product is really helpful. I think it's really a great being able to apply what you learned, and I do feel like these simulations make that possible. So that's what I'm excited to dig into today. So if you've spent more than 3 decades working with simulations across professions, what first drew you to the experience-based learning, and what has kept you committed to it over time?
So I fell into it. It was a job offer that working for a company that did this kind of work. It was pioneering at the time
Yeah.
and didn't quite know what I was getting into, but then I started doing it. And I still remember one of the early programs I did was with Ford Motor Company, teaching finance. Not necessarily the most exciting subject if you're not in finance.
Right.
Um, but now a couple of the participants said to me at the end of the program, this was the best training I've been to. And they'd been working for Ford longer than I'd been alive.
Wow.
And so that kind of lent itself to there's something to this, right? Because it's not just content, it's
No.
engaging, it's fun,
Yes.
it makes the
Yes.
content real, it makes it feel like I can use this information and I see how it
Mhm.
can help me and how I can help my job, how I can help the organization. And so and that keeps refreshing itself in any
Mhm.
context and every place you're at where you get to both observe and participate
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
participants as they engage with. And, as is well known, right? It's not just kids that say the darndest things, right? Adults do
Yep.
too. And
Yes, they do.
if we can get people to not just engage with what's in front of them, but to think and to say what they're thinking,
Mhm.
because that's incredibly valuable. Everybody has their own unique perspective, and
Mhm.
everybody's perspective is absolutely valid and really critical to moving the ball forward in whatever situation you're in. And the challenge is that if your perspective is unique to you, my perspective is unique to me, the only way I'm going to know what you think or what you see is if you tell me. And so creating an opportunity in which we can both engage in something that's important, but also provoke organic conversation, peers, between colleagues, between teams. It can be multi-level, and getting that stuff in a non-confrontational way out there for discussion, for processing. Our favorite thing to hear is when one participant says, "Huh, I never would have thought of it that way," because of something they heard from a friend. And
Right?
all of a sudden, their horizons expand
Yep.
because they're not locked into the way they do things, which is, again, valid but limiting,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so the opportunity to see things, to see how the content applies, but also to see it through other perspectives, it's a lot of fun to watch.
I can only imagine. And also thinking, just giving them the opportunity to play it through and to be in a scenario or, whatever, subject or content it is, being able, I mean, to practice. I think it's critical for the growth stage for any learner, is being able to apply what you learned in a situation, even if it's, you're in a simulation. I think it's a great way for you to just practice all those skills that you've learned along the way. Even though you go, "Oh, I've got a toolbox, I know, but have you pulled any of the tools out yet?" Well, no, I haven't had to because I haven't been in a situation. Well, this provides a perfect example. And I just love, looking at it with teacher education and coursework and all of that, you know, uh, we have an opportunity to select and put one within a course that relates to the content. And so now not only are we introducing something, reinforcing it, we're getting to that application and evaluation type stage. And even, they would be self-evaluating themselves, So I think that is just, I think it's really a cool concept.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I agree, certainly. I mean, I didn't make it up. And so it's always great to when others get enthusiastic about it too. And one of the, you were pointing to one of the key benefits that's often missed in what people refer to as experiential learning or different applications that are out there, because they're all important. And this is
Right,
not, rarely do we find something that it's this or that. When it
right.
comes to experience, every experience is
Uh-huh,
valuable, no matter
uh-huh.
what the form. And obviously, the content
Right.
is important. And it's really the blend is critical, right? You need the
Yep.
instruction and you need the experience. But the thing about
Right.
experience, as distinct from instruction, is that in instruction, it's really all about the right way of things,
Right.
right? We
Right.
teach you what you need to know, we teach you the
Yeah, the best
process, the
practices.
framework. Guys, we're not going to teach you the wrong way, right? But when it comes to experience, our best learning actually comes from getting it wrong,
Yep.
from
Yep.
making mistakes. And so,
Yep.
whereas the instruction is all about the right way, then we provide the opportunity for experience where it's okay to make mistakes. And in fact, it's even a good idea
Right.
from a learning standpoint to make mistakes because, and this points to one of the key benefits of this approach to simulation, which is the importance of experiencing consequences, right?
Mhm.
We deal with
Yep.
scenarios, we deal with cases, and we talk about them. And it's really important to process and be situationally aware about what's going on. But at the end of the day, and especially in education, one of the things that's absolutely clear is you're never going to get it right? You can make a good
Yep.
decision that's really important for one
Right.
student, but that doesn't
Right.
mean that it's going to be a good decision for every student.
Every
It
right.
doesn't mean that it's going to be applied in other, the administration might not agree with it. Some parents might not agree with it, right? And you don't know what that mix
Right.
of perspectives of stakeholders that are going to come and have put, whether you like it or not, into what you're doing. And so it's important on the one hand that we exercise good judgment, right? We need to make the best decision we can. But
Right.
then it's really important that we need to be able to experience the consequences because
Mhm.
there's no such thing as a one and done,
Yep.
right? When you make that mistake, or even if you didn't feel like you made a mistake, but somebody else did, right? You're going to need to respond. Something else is going to
Mhm.
happen. There's going to be a next step. So you've got to
Yes.
be able to respond then as well and either course correct if appropriate, or you know what? Sometimes you're meeting with that parent and they're just not happy. No matter
Mhm.
what you do, no matter what you
What you
say, you're not
say.
going to make them happy.
Right.
You just need to be able to deal with that circumstance.
Yep.
It doesn't mean, it's not diminishing to you, right? It is what it is.
No.
They have their perspective and it's valid and it's their children. So,
Mm-hmm.
we can't argue with that, but we still need to do our job and
Correct.
manage even when the circumstances are difficult.
Right.
And it's
Right.
that being able to play that flow of time, which is
Yes.
distinct from a case, right? Cases deal with a point in time.
Yeah.
Simulations really allow us to capture the flow of time so that
Mm-hmm.
you can experience both the immediate, but also the ripple effect, the things that happen as a result and to other people in your sphere of influence, whether you knew they were there or not, right?
Yeah.
It's better to be surprised here where
Oh,
there's no real
yes.
stakes at play
Yes.
than when you get, hit from something in left field when you're on the
Yes.
job and there
You're
are
not quite,
kids on the other end of
yeah.
that.
Yeah, and it's got real impact and and that way you're a little bit more prepared and do feel like and with that comes too some confidence, I'm sure, as they finish these simulations, just knowing that they've worked through very similar like with like role playing. It's very, it really does make a difference. Great. Well,
Yeah,
when
we
you
really
talk,
find that the thing that we, and there's actually research on this as well, the thing that we're focusing on is self-efficacy, right? It's not that you walk out of this saying, I got this. I know exactly what to do. It's no, it's that I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'll handle it.
yeah,
And I have no idea what the consequence will be of what I'm doing, but I'll handle it. And
right,
that's the way we can that efficacy can bring us to well-being, right? We're a little less stressed, we're a little less tense about and a
yeah,
little maybe a little less reactive or opportunity to exercise some thought before
right.
exercising a
Very.
reaction and then be able to proceed accordingly.
Absolutely. And I just was thinking, I don't have that data in front of me, but how many decisions does a teacher make in one single day? I think I've heard just an astronomical number with
It's a
that.
lot.
And gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful to feel like you had a handle on some of that? And, I think that that is is really powerful, and I think it can make a big difference, and especially newer teachers, a teacher that's coming into the profession. But I'll even tell you, even after being in the profession, it's I was a few years ago, but for many years, I definitely am a lifelong learner, so I'm really excited too to dig in with School Sims too, because I just love I think it just shapes people. It helps them feel more confident, and confidence is absolutely contagious for your students, and you want them to, feel that. So I think that School Sims has some great, so far the simulations we've done have been so cool. So one thing that I hear a lot from leaders is that decision making can be lonely. How do simulations create a safer space for learners to think and even fail together? And I know we talked about this a little bit before, but anything else you'd like to share about that?
The One of the key elements when you look at the data now on churn and how long people stay on the job, it's obviously very disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the idea that when I was just starting the company, the focus was on leadership before we actually targeted the classroom as well. When you think about the idea that any systemic change, typically, and this is writ large in terms of the studies on change management, right? It can take maybe 7 years to institute a full change.
Right.
Obviously, that's, you can argue with that, but it takes
Right.
time.
Yes.
And if we're not keeping principals in the building for more than 3 years or 4 years, or superintendents, how do we in fact then achieve any level of change?
You're
How
right.
can we reform education if we're constantly starting over?
Yeah.
Whether we are really starting over or our staff feels like we're starting over.
Right.
So anything that we can do to embed levels, anything to
Mm-hmm.
improve the well-being
Mm-hmm.
is critical. And part of that is how isolating, and you made reference to that, the job is, whether
Mm-hmm.
you're a building leader or a classroom leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are the tip of the spear. You're the one right
Yep.
in front there, and it's you.
You're right.
You're
Yep.
alone.
Mm-hmm.
And the stress and the tension and what we know about loneliness and how it can actually take away years of life. I mean, it's how
Mm-hmm.
damaging that can be.
Yep.
This job lends itself to that. So anything that we can do to de-isolate in the
Yes.
moment is critical. And the power of this modality is that even when you're doing it asynchronously, right? So first of all, this modality is so powerful
Yep.
because
Is
it can
yep.
be done both synchronously or asynchronously.
Okay.
But even asynchronously, when you're doing it alone, when you have a cohort of students who are engaging in an experience and they're all doing kind of the same experience, although it's a choose your own adventure, so they will end up going through the experience differently, but it is the same classroom challenge. It is the same set of characters that they all become familiar with. It is the same classroom and context that they become familiar with because of the engagement of the underlying storytelling, right? So this does
Mm-hmm.
harness that power. So as humans, we engage with stories. There's no better tool for engagement than
I
stories.
agree.
And with educators, there's no more compelling thing than talking
Yep.
about educating and in a story context. So you get students who are engaged, they have an experience, they may do it more than once, which is great, but now they have a common language. So whether they're coming in from they're aspiring, they're early candidates, way pre-service, they haven't gone into the classroom yet, their only experience is having been students not too long ago, or at any point of, as you mentioned, it can be anywhere along the path of getting into the classroom and being the teacher of record, and even for experienced teachers, you're going to be able to now have a baseline level of communication that allows you to share and understand each other at a deeper level,
Yeah.
right? So that even if you're doing it through asynchronous discussion boards, right, your cohort members have insight that you understand because you also were there. And so if you're student teaching and if you're in the classroom, if I'm going to talk to you about my experience in my classroom, well, I've got now to explain the entirety of that classroom and that school and that those students. And you can't
Mm-hmm.
really talk about the students because they're people, so it limits in terms of our ability to share that understanding and to build that camaraderie or that understanding that, wow, I'm not alone,
You're
right?
right.
My peers are going through the same challenges as I am. They're struggling with the same ideas or the same how things manifest in the classroom. And we were talking before about the classroom management,
Yep.
right? Every time you're facing a student who's not, well, there's an issue where there's a
Yep.
disruption, it's going to be different every time. Even the same student won't disrupt exactly the same way from time to
Exactly.
time.
Right.
And so the ability to have that level of communication and that connection, especially when you do it synchronously, that opportunity to actually talk with others about dealing with the situation, it can really help to de-isolate, to help for that well-being, and again, makes a powerful leverage, creates a powerful leverage for faculty to then use with their students to further the broader objectives, right? The goal isn't the sim. The goal is what the sim enables, the experience of playing in this
Yes.
way and tying all these things together. So it just gives the faculty a really powerful tool to
Yeah.
both allow for practice, but also to put it in its place, so to speak, where
Mhm.
you're not alone.
And discuss it because there's I can imagine a great deal of reflection then that also happens at the end naturally. I mean, and the simulation warrants it because you've just gone through and gone, well, how did that play out? I can also see the flip side of where this is could be so beneficial is if, and I have seen in some of our rural districts that might be teachers are a bit more isolated. They might be the only third grade teacher, at the school or the only, and so, just knowing the teachers that I've worked with, when you're struggling with something, say classroom management, you do feel isolated, and sometimes you're also not open to sharing that with your colleagues. So, because now you're struggling, so, and you're a new teacher, so a lot of feelings go with that. I'm not enough. And all. And so would be a great tool to bring others in and work. I mean, in several ways, I could see that teacher in a rural area using it and then bringing in other teachers and other content. Because still doesn't, oftentimes I always say, you need to make sure classroom, you feel confident in classroom management, whether you're the PE teacher, whether you're out in the field playing with your students, or you're in a math trigonometry classroom. You have to start with solid classroom management skills so you can teach. So I can see the benefits in many spaces, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The cohort I love. I would love the reflection, that the rich discussion that could happen afterwards. Oh, this is what I did. This is what I selected. Oh, gosh, you know what? I thought about doing that one, but I did this. I mean, what a great conversation to have after the fact as well. So I can see it so well with those in a cohort, maybe even in an EPP program, it's embedded in coursework. But then also, even as a K-12 school district, maybe it's a support for your teachers that they could use for team building and discussion. What a great way to spend a professional development day, with your teachers walking away going, "Gosh, I really felt like we dug in there a little bit deeper, and I'm walking away with a few strategies that I'm going to try tomorrow." I think that, still that also sticks to it as well.
And even that's yes, to all of that. And we do believe fundamentally that experience is the best teacher, but that's really only true when there's an opportunity to reflect, right? We don't remember
Yes.
every experience we've had.
No.
It depends how we reflect on it, and then
Hmm.
that's where the learning will come from.
Yeah,
And depending on how emotionally engaged we are, obviously there's a lot of
of course.
neuroscience at play in terms of
Of
what's
course.
memorable. And again, the nice thing is that because these tie into those underlying stresses that we feel and worries, right? The
Yep.
emotional engagement is present almost at all times, and so the
Yep.
opportunity is for learning is really significant. But the other, aspect, to take what you were saying even one step further, which is another way that the simulations can be utilized is obviously amongst peers, but also with leaders or with mentors or coaches,
Hmm.
right? So that becomes where if I'm playing this with my building leader, now I get remind them because they were probably in the classroom at one point, but now they're
Yep.
in the chair.
Right. You're right.
And they may forget somewhat what it was like to be
Absolutely.
in the classroom, and just to go through that struggle of, okay, oh my goodness, this is what maybe it's sharing their valuable experience that they had
Right.
that led them on their pathway, or just talking through or reminding them, and also how they can be supportive, right? So if we have
Yes.
leaders in their development, so they're developing leadership development, but as part of that, they also can play a teacher sim in which they can play it as the teacher.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
the extrapolation from that as part of the reflection is, and how can I support this teacher when
Yes.
this is happening for them? And let's say it goes badly.
Yep.
How do I
Yep.
back them up to know that they're
Yep.
not alone?
That's a
That it's
great
not
point.
just that you have other people doing the same kinds of things, but in the building, I have the support. They have my back. Even when I get it wrong, they'll help me behind closed
Yes.
doors and they'll
Yep.
support me when those doors are
Yes.
open.
Yes, and dare they, maybe they'll have a suggestion for another
Right.
simulation to try out. And, I'm sure then that goes and goes and goes. But I think that is, I think it's really a great tool to help teachers grow, be able to use. I mean, I love the idea of using it as a cohort, but I also could see the need using it as I'm just really struggling in this area. Maybe I'm a newer teacher, don't feel comfortable talking to my colleagues yet about it. So I'm gonna help myself feel a bit more confident by going through some of these simulations and feeling like, okay, I can see now the impact and I can self-reflect on that. I think both ways are super would be helpful for any teacher. So that is, well, some of the hardest leadership moments involve people, families, staff, students. How do simulations help leaders practice navigating those human moments with care?
So, I mean, that's a great question relating to the power of this modality. And as I mentioned before, what this form of simulation allows us to do is capture the flow of time, right? In addition to there not being there's no such thing as a one and done, nor are
Correct.
you ever making decisions in a bubble. Every decision you make, right? So one of the underpinning elements from a research perspective is systems thinking that
Mm-hmm.
infuses every simulation that we have because it's important to recognize that there are going to be implications, that
Mm-hmm.
it takes a village, right? And
Yes,
the
it
village
does.
is involved. And
Yep.
if you lose sight of any aspect of that village, right, it's going to rear its head at some point,
Right.
positively or negatively, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's helpful,
Yep.
Sometimes it's less so, but either way, it needs to be navigated. And so the opportunity to both embed that into the narrative flow, right? The decision making, right? So when you're making decisions with a student, you may hear something from the parents that needs to be attended to. And then there's all strategies of connecting with them, and then other members of the community or other members of the building, of staff, other members of administration of the district, whatever the case may be, right? In the natural flow, right? I can teach you all of this, but that doesn't really allow you to, because we're still teaching in an orderly fashion, because that's the way we teach. That's the
Right.
way we have to teach. But life doesn't present in that orderly fashion. And so as we capture the flow of time, we will naturally deal with the implications and involvement and integration with, even whether it's decision making opportunities or just insight that comes up because of the flow of the story. Also, given that it is experience driven and we don't want to overwhelm them in the scenario, right? You're not putting on glasses and just dealing with what's being presented to you, right? What we're trying to do is actually activate the imagination. We want to get students to see themselves in the action. That's right. In just about every sim, we tell you what role you're in, right? You're a third grade teacher, you're a sixth grade teacher, you're a high school teacher, whatever the case may be. But we don't tell you anything else about you other than maybe how many years you've been at it.
Right.
It's you, right? We want you to see
Right.
yourself in the action. And so in your mind's eye, we're going to create a context in the simulation, but it's not your context. But we want it to be authentic enough that you can say, well, that's not my classroom, but it could be. And we're often dealing with video and text. So, well, they're not my students, but they could be. And
Uh-huh.
so, in my mind's eye, I'm actually seeing what's happening. And I can extrapolate in my imagination of things that happened to me, or things that I've heard about, or things that people have told me about, or my parents have told me if I'm at that stage. And all of a sudden, I'm expanding, I'm extrapolating from the experience. Again, the goal is not the sim, the goal is the experience you have playing the sim. And this gives enormous leverage to the faculty to also wrap other things around the experience that students are having in their simulation. Because if often an easy extrapolation question is, what are the ethical considerations at play in that simulation experience? Now, we didn't necessarily write the simulation around particular ethical considerations.
Right.
But if I ask a student to identify what was at play, they'll answer, right? They'll come
Right.
up with something that they'll imagine or that it seems appropriate to them. And each student will come up with different ones because of how they think, and every one of
Yep.
those is valid. And that provides great insight to the faculty on how their students are thinking, first of
Yep.
all, which is
It
great.
does.
But
Yes.
you can then leverage that in terms of the rest of the instruction, right? The simulations are great for application, but they're also great for discovery,
Yeah.
right? When a participant, especially in early career, way pre-service,
Mm-hmm.
engages in the classroom management, they think they've got this, right? They were students. They know their
Yeah.
peers. They're close to it.
Yeah.
They know how to manage those
Yeah.
personalities, right? Everybody's got a good plan until you get punched in the
It
face,
just, yeah.
figuratively.
Yeah, no,
Um,
absolutely. Until you step in front of the classroom on your first day and go, oh my. No, I think that that is, I think it's also just, yeah, and I think with school sims, being able to practice different simulations is definitely going to raise self-confidence. I will tell you, when I decided to become a teacher, I never imagined, I wasn't thinking about those conversations. I was thinking about students, teaching students. Well, there's so much more that goes, we know, being a teacher. It's talking with parents after, maybe it's a situation not so great. And so those all bring up feelings in for everyone. And some, I know pre-service teachers are like, I have no idea how I would deal with this. Well, guess what? These are opportunities to practice and practice different situations, practice how you would react because sometimes you just don't even know how you would react in that situation. And you could really do some reputation damage, on yourself if you hadn't hasn't been thought through. So I just think that also just giving the opportunity too for them to practice and go, oh, I tend to be maybe I raise my voice. I need to control that. Different things that maybe go absolutely unnoticed because you haven't seen yourself in this situation when a parent does come to the classroom door at the end of the school day and you've just walked the kids out and you've got someone who wants to discuss something in a, maybe it's a serious manner, and it just gives you some skills, I guess. I do feel like this would definitely help with confidence. So,
Yeah,
well, community, yeah,
one of my favorite
go ahead.
quotes is from Viktor Frankl, who was a
Okay,
Holocaust
yep,
survivor and
yep.
a psychiatrist and neuroscientist. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose. And then the quote goes
That's
on.
exactly,
And,
exactly.
there's one thing that is absolutely certain for teachers and administrators is there are a lot of stimuli.
Yeah,
You're going
you're
to
right.
be in situations in which you will feel a reactive response coming on.
Yes, yes,
And rarely will those go well. When you just
correct,
react, when you get
correct.
angry, when that parent comes to you at the end of the day and you're
Yeah.
not ready for
Mm-hmm.
them. Um, and so it's really important to whatever degree we can, right? I mean, we get into those panic modes and amygdala hijack, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
No,
very
right.
complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But can we, through some muscle memory, infuse a pause
Yes.
so that when that stimulus presents itself, just take a breath.
Yep.
Don't
You're right.
react. Okay.
Right.
Just give it a second and try and infuse a level of thought in it. But either
Mm-hmm.
way, just not reacting is
Right.
probably going to lead to a better outcome, not
Uh,
guaranteed, but
no, but
probably at least a little bit better. And maybe even sometimes you don't respond, right? You
no, you're
just
right.
hold it in,
Yep.
suck it down, and just let it go. Let them vent. Something's maybe going on. You don't know. But how do we, to be able to address that reaction is something that, again, can be very powerful, but is really not easy. And so and this is the only way we can get at that is through experience. And doing this too many times can be jading, can be isolating, can be a whole lot of other things. This is an opportunity to take some power back.
Absolutely. And there are, and within many educator preparation programs, that's something to think about. Has that been covered? I would say for the most part, probably not. We're focusing on content, we're focusing on classroom management strategies, but some of those obvious, even I'm not prepared to have this conversation right now. Could we schedule it for tomorrow? That might give you just that help to go, okay, I'm going, either I need help or I need more time to process and think about it, those kinds of things. But those are skills. And unless you practice it, that might not naturally be your instinct to say. And so it's those kind of things. And do educator preparation programs address that? I would say probably not. And that's a real life situation. I can't tell you how many times that happened to me in the years that I taught, many times. And there were times I had to say, I'm not prepared, whether it was scheduling or just the way also they maybe are coming towards you. You're like, you know what, I'm just not ready for this conversation, but let's make an appointment. And you're validating how that you want to spend time with them, but you want to be prepared when you have that time for them. So I think this also gives that opportunity for that as well. So that is great. Community colleges play a critical role in preparing educators and leaders, often serving diverse place-based communities. What excites you most about the potential for simulations to support aspiring teachers before they ever step into a principal or district role? So that's one question. I have one little more that goes on to it. What does this mean for the institutions and communities they serve?
Well, I mean, as we know, and I would argue a little bit with this, but teachers,
Yeah,
other than parents, will have the greatest effect on students. I think
absolutely.
administrators, when the data certainly show that they're a close second, but because administrators are responsible for keeping multiple teachers in the building, in
Yep.
theory, administrators have even a broader reach. But we really need to have good teachers.
Yes.
It's great if we could say we have excellent teachers, but you know what? Excellent teachers don't just happen. They evolve,
Mm-hmm.
they grow,
Yeah.
they got to stay on the
Mm-hmm.
job, they
Yep.
get better as they go, and our
Mm-hmm.
students will continue to benefit from that. So anything we can do to both accelerate the process by which
Mm-hmm.
We get students interested in the role. They may have an inclination towards teaching. We can support
Hmm.
that and make
Hmm.
sure that their vision of it is not all rainbows and gumdrops. It's not easy, but it's worthwhile, right? It's a
Yes.
calling, and it's something that has tremendous benefits in terms of, what is it that, it's your step into eternity, right? You are influencing
Yep.
somebody potentially for a lifetime.
For the rest of the life. Yep.
And so, being able to prepare for that, encourage and engage and involve, right? The profession also evolves, and that
Hmm.
evolves through the practice of the individuals within it. And so the more we can create that space in which we're enabling folks that pathway into the classroom, having stronger presence in the classroom, both in the classroom itself, with your colleagues, with the building, those relationships, and beyond the building, obviously, all of those things are so critical to, as we got the village component, right? There was a study back done I think it was 2014, maybe. It was called churn, right? It was the
Okay.
cost of turnover of
Oh,
principals.
yeah.
And, they really looked at in a very holistic way the cost of replacing a leader in a building. And I
Oh,
think this relates to the classroom too. And
yes.
the implications, not just what's happening in the classroom and not just what's happening in the building, but it's what's happening in the community and the
Yes.
students who are part of that community and the parents who are part of that community. And the implications, you can take it all the way up through the business, through
Hmm. Hmm.
opportunities for jobs and workforce development. It is a very strong link. You don't have to go too deep to see the connections of that, right? Workforce development begins when that student first steps foot pre-K into the classroom, right? That's where it
Right.
begins.
Right.
If we
Yes.
create motivated learners, it doesn't get any better than that, right? You
You're
want
right.
people to be, you mentioned that you're a lifelong learner. That's what we want, right? That's the
Yeah.
best we can do, right? Is
Yeah.
create a
Yep.
lifelong learner. We may not get you with this math lesson right now. We may not get you everything you need to know
Right.
on literacy right now. But if you keep wanting to be interested, if you keep being curious, and so if we create adults that are like that, if we can help the adults along the way, that just makes it easier for them to do it with the kids. So that's
Mhm.
what excites me, that the
No, that.
opportunity to contribute to that process, to be part of something in a scalable way. I mean, one of the most important things, yes, we know that experience is the best teacher, but it's got to be scalable. I've got to meet the
Yes.
students where they
Yes.
are. This modality allows us to, and allows the community colleges to reach students wherever they are, whenever they are, in a manner which can bring out the best in them, right? It motivates them, it
Yep.
gets them talking, it gets them sharing. They have so much value inside. One of the things that we've even seen is that we can create a scenario as we put it into a context. And because of the varied experiences that people have, it may be triggering, right? Inadvertently,
Oh,
but it may trigger
absolutely.
somebody, right? Because of
Absolutely.
their lived
Yes.
experience.
Yes, of
The
course.
oppor- so the opportunity in the sim is when that does happen, is you can ask why, because there is a reason why something is triggering. And getting insight into why that could be triggering, right? That's a lived experience issue. That could be an individual's lived experience. It can be a community or
Right?
cultural lived experience. That is so important to know because whatever they read into the situation, you will have students who will do the same thing or something similar.
Yep.
And so the better you are at realizing that my way is not the only way.
Right.
And there are other absolutely appropriate ways of looking at things, and I have to account for them. And
Hmm.
I may disagree with them. I may not be aligned with them. Doesn't matter, right? You're not there to
Right.
teach only some students. You're there to teach all the students and deal with all of their parents. And so the opportunity to both practice in your own self, to recognize that you may have insights, maybe even a bias, dare I say, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's an is thing. And the
Right.
question isn't to judge. The question is, how do I still make good decisions, even when
Yep.
that manifests? So, again, the opportunity for faculty to engage with students, even when,
Hmm.
because they're going to face it. Whatever is happening here, they're probably going to face it in their schools when they go out there. It
Right.
doesn't make it right, but you still got to be prepared.
You still have to.
And so having that opportunity to, again, for yourself as part of the discussion, all of those things can. So again, I think that community colleges are very
Yep.
close to this, and therefore this is a particularly compelling opportunity to support those efforts, and that's why
Right.
we're excited about this opportunity.
I love that. And then when you think about the next generation of school leaders, what do you hope they get to practice before they are ever in the role? So is there one in particular that you think of your simulations or ones that you've been interested in creating that you would say you feel that would be good for them to practice before they step in? If you had to just pick one.
Well, and this is a particular experience that was extremely notable for me. So we have one simulation. It's a leadership sim that's dealing with conflict among staff. And the lesson is no matter how much you've learned conceptually and for instructionally, the job of education is about people. And you need to be aware of your reaction to people and relationships and
Yep.
how important that is. And I think we get desensitized to that when we're immersed in an instructional content, right? It's very,
Agree.
very dry. And in this context, so in this sim, we happen to have two versions of this sim. And so again, the sim starts out, you're a principal, elementary school, one of your special ed teachers come to you in great distress. What you find out is she's being bullied by another teacher, by a mainstream teacher. So you have the opportunity to respond to her. She's again in great distress. You don't have a lot of time. So that's how the sim starts out. And then you're gonna have to manage this evolving situation, which is gets pretty ugly. But anyway, it's
Yeah.
it's an
But
interesting experience.
this is, I mean, within all our conversations this morning, we talked a lot about teachers interacting with students. I mean, it didn't even pop in my head. Yes, the relationships among colleagues are critical in order to grow. Oftentimes, whether or not your school supports team, working together as a team or not, you're still working with other humans, and you also are, whether teachers like it or not, they are a role model for all their students, and students pick up on every. And so that is, I didn't even consider that, Ken, as well as you have so many simulations that grow you as a leader, as a teacher leader, as, maybe too, I like the idea of being able to dip in and for people even, are selecting maybe the next simulation they want to do. Maybe they're interested in moving into administration. So it sounds like you have those stepping stones to do that, to piece it into the simulations, which is so incredibly helpful. I think that that just helps give you and what I do, dare I say, these simulations, would you say it also they're about just getting to know myself better and getting to know how I react, getting to know how what areas I may need to work on or something, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's
And that
great.
is one of the things you can ask on that thing that I was just describing, right? So you'll see, in the sim, you see one person, right?
Yep,
And you can, in your mind's eye, think about what if it was somebody else? Would I have that same reaction?
yep,
And there you get to know, especially when you're playing it on your own, you get to realize if you've been prompted with thinking about it this way, that I am influenced by, if I have a relationship with this teacher, okay, then I may react. If I actually don't like this teacher, she's not my favorite. Okay, he
that's
doesn't,
okay.
that's it. That's just
Yeah,
reality, right?
that's life.
But it doesn't mean that I'm going to give her any less
Right.
response or him, right?
Yep,
And does that matters? And so being able to reflect on my own approach, and I can do this in the safety of my own space, potentially if we're
right,
doing it
right.
asynchronously.
Yeah,
And but even if it's not asynchronous, by the way, because of there's also neuroscience on oxytocin and the trust that we feel when we're engaging in a story together, the opportunity to feel a little bit more trusting and that it is a safe space for me to process even amongst peers.
yeah.
It's a wonderful thing.
I know there is, and this is the thing, Ken, you know there's so much the science behind it, which is great. So thank you for spending time with us today. Your insights about experience-based learning and creating a safer space for leaders and teachers to practice deeply align with the work that NACCTEP institutions are doing to advance in the country. So I want to thank you so much. We will be sending out some more information for an upcoming webinar so that everyone can join. And so we will be sending that will happen in April, and we will send that out probably in the next week or so. So please keep an eye out for that. That will come from NACCTEP. And thank you again, NACCTEP listeners. Thank you, Ken, so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of NACCTEP Now, where you can learn about all things community college teacher education. We hope you have enjoyed this episode and will share what you have learned with other education professionals. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Follow us on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. This is your host, Julie Ferin, saying goodbye for now, and we'll catch you next time right here on the NACCTEP Now podcast.